Thank you all for being part of what we all hope becomes an ongoing fixture at this great institution. And let me pay special attention to our sponsor for this unique event. Today would not have happened if not for the enthusiastic response of Mike Sweet, class of 1994. 9 months ago, I reached out to J School alumni, both journalism grads and IMC grads, and told them what I was trying to do. His affirmation of my idea and willingness to help started the ball rolling, and that is why we are here today. So thank you very much, Mike.
Sure.
Wow, what a journey it has been. But do not be mistaken, this event is the result of a collective effort of the great people we are so fortunate to have here in this building. Dean Norton, it all starts with you and your vision to make the Meek School of Journalism and New Media the place for students to come pursuing careers in journalism and integrated marketing communications. And Dean Mitchell, thank you for putting an infrastructure in place that keeps the trains running on time and the building heated in the winter and cooled in the summer. This is surely the best team of professionals I have ever had the privilege of working with. At the end of last spring's semester, the dean asked me to consider putting a class together on how to get a job. Apparently, word had spread through the building that I had helped 2 of our graduating seniors obtain jobs. I'm proud to say one of those students is with us today. Together, they represent all that makes this program so special. And collectively, we as members of the Meek School should be very proud indeed. Tori, please stand. The irony of their stories is both Tori and her classmate Haley Lamer truly did not need my help to launch themselves into the ranks of the professional world. They possessed the academic qualifications, the requisite experience, and the job-ready attitudes that made them formidable entry-level candidates. And yet they were coming to me for help. Whatever role I played in their ability to secure gainful employment pales in comparison to the body of work they amassed over their 4 years at Ole Miss. They were perfectly positioned to lead their own job search and to lead it successfully. And yet after 4 years in this building, they lacked the necessary skills to do so. Why? We had done a great job of teaching our students the fundamentals of journalism and IMC and for preparing them for the workplace. But getting that first job, for some it was an easy exercise. But for others, it could be a long, arduous, and difficult process fraught with great frustration. And for all, there was no standard protocol to follow, and everyone approached the process from a different perspective. So with the dean's direction, I set about creating a standard protocol that our students could follow, and I wrapped it up in an interesting class called Transitioning from Student to Professional, IMC 362. I believe I have some of my former students and current students in that class as well here today. Our inaugural class just concluded. My goal was to initiate a dialogue that explored the best practices of job hunting. I won't bore you with the details of the class, but for those that are interested, I will gladly send you the syllabus. Today is an unintended consequence of that class. Whatever I might be able to teach our students, and remember, I had never done this before, I knew the materials and lessons presented would be greatly enhanced and reinforced by the help of our J School alumni. And that is why I reached out to the panelists that are here today and why I'm so grateful that they agreed to attend. By having you all here, you keep me honest and add much credibility to our program. And our seniors in attendance, thank you for making the effort to participate in today's activities. You are the Meek School of Journalism and New Media. You are our most visible and tangible representation of our brand. In fact, you are the brand. And as you end this chapter here at Ole Miss and begin a new adventure, we're confident you will represent us with distinction. And so now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce all of our alumni who are here today, and then we can get into the program. So, Mike Sweet, Heather Floyd, Leslie Westbrook, and Meg Pace. Our first panel discussion deals with how to get a job, and will be followed with the second panel discussion on, now that I have that job, how to succeed in it. So Mike, tell us some of the things that you've learned in your journey since being a senior here at Ole Miss.
Well, first, thanks, Mark, for having us and and for putting this on. I think this is going to be a great event. I know it's the first one, so I'm sure we'll learn some things and to make it better so y'all can benefit in getting a job and kind of having a good mindset going out into the real world, so to speak, and then for future classes to do it. But what was the question? No, yeah, in talking last night and looking at y'all's feedback on what your expectations were for this day, I sensed, and believe me, I can relate because I was there too, but I sensed a lot of angst, a lot of anxiety, a lot of unknown, which is totally normal. I was there too, we all were, but I'd love for everyone to just take a deep breath and just kind of let it out and realize that you are going to get a job. You are going to, find a career. It may not be the first one your first position or first company, but you're going to find something. We've all made mistakes, still make mistakes, not only in your professional career, but in other things. But it's I've always been told you can always learn more from your mistakes than your successes. And so with that, I would just, in this journey that you're about to take, that you just, continue to be resilient, continue to be passionate about what you're doing. I know that sounds real, easy to say from my standpoint, but, arguably the next 5 years of your life, you have a lot of great opportunity. I mean, most of y'all, I assume, are not married or have a mortgage or have kids like we do. And so you have the opportunity to take the most risk in your professional career, meaning you could, hop in the car and go to, Chicago or wherever. I mean, really have an opportunity to go somewhere different and learn something and take that opportunity to, with a goal in mind, of course, of getting a career, but to really take a chance and see what's out there, because there's a lot out there. I mean, not just in the areas where you grew up and everything. So
last night we talked about that first step in picking a direction. Why don't you share with us how you made that first step? Heather, you want to take a crack at that question?
Sure. So currently I work for Do the Loom. I'm responsible for digital marketing, e-commerce, specifically for our Russell Athletic brand. So all the swag you see out there, that was compliments of Russell. Make sure you get some. But that is not exactly what I had envisioned for myself, when I was graduating. So I graduated in 2007, and I was a journalism major, print journalism, magazine emphasis. I double majored also in studio art, and so I had this grand idea that I was off to New York and I was going to be a fashion magazine editor. That's kind of what I had my heart set on. I had internships. Had 3 different internships in New York for several fashion publications, like Elle Magazine and Women's Day, and actually did an internship with McGraw-Hill Publishing, and then went back to New York right after I graduated, kind of still set on that dream, worked for InStyle as a temp. Living in New York City when you're making minimum wage is not exactly livable or sustainable. And so found myself actually moving to Nashville for a position as a contributing editor for a social scene publication in Nashville, which was a wonderful introduction to the city. It was a really wonderful first job, but I had this very set idea of, I've got to do journalism, that's what I majored in, that's what I need to kind of stick to. And so my advice would be nimble, be very open to opportunities, because you don't know exactly what it's going to lead to. my type of role did not exist really when I first graduated. So, you know, the way that companies use social media today did not exist. It was just kind of on the cusp come like about 2008 is really when companies started using things like Twitter, and Facebook became open to more than just college campuses and things like that. So that type of job did not exist when I was actually in school. So that's probably going to be true for a lot of you too. Whatever you end up doing is not going, it probably doesn't exist today. You know, and I think that finding a job you love is kind of like dating. You date a bunch of people that aren't the right person for you. You find that right person, and it's great. So you're going to have a lot of different jobs. You're probably going to stay at your first job anywhere from 6 months to a year, and then you're going to go on to the next thing, because you don't know what you want until you find something that you don't want. So that's my advice, is that don't think of, God, I gotta find something that I'm gonna be in for like 5-10 years, and it's this like permanent thing. You know, look at something of, okay, here's my skill set, here's what I kind of enjoy, let's test it out. It's all an experiment, especially they say that, you know, in your 20s, that's kind of when you figure out what you like. Your 30s is when you get down to business and you really work hard. 40s is when you're at your pinnacle of your career. You coast kind of into your 50s and such. So that's kind of...
Well, wait a second. Where does that leave some of us on the stage right now? Leslie, tell us about...
We can speak from our experience.
Yes.
We have something different to offer. It's just...
Leslie,
I'm still going back to
Absolutely.
the dating analogy.
That is my experience. that
graduated in 1968, and I think it would be interesting to hear your perspective on how you approached getting a job at that time and how things have changed from your perspective.
I don't mind saying that almost 50 years ago, I was sitting where you are, only we didn't have the Overby Auditorium, and we didn't have these kinds of career event days. My story's a little different in that nice Southern girls in that era were taught to be, honey, you'll make a great wife and mother, and if you want to go to college, think about getting a teaching certificate, because that's something you can fall back on if something happens to your husband. Now, I hope that's a very different message from what any of you are receiving today, I hope. What happened is, though, it got me to college. I did get my degree. I have a BAE with a master's, a major in English and education. I got my teaching certificate. And 3 weeks before the big fat Southern wedding in August of 1968, when I was marrying my college sweetheart, which was a script written by somebody, but I realized not for me, I walked away. I didn't get married. And I heard of an opportunity, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I was programmed. And some of you, I've met students over the last 2 years that have said, well, my father wants me to be a doctor. My mother wants me to be a teacher. And there's some of that yada yada that's in your ear about what you should do. And it's okay, because you're going to get your degree. You're going to get that first job. And Mike, thank you. We all agree. You can exhale, because you will get a job. You will get a first job. It most likely won't be the one that you're going to be married to, but it will be a stepping stone. And that's the way you want to look at it. It doesn't have to be, you might have to room with 5 other people to pay the bills. You want to learn something. You want to learn from people. You don't want to be an entrepreneur right out of school. But you want to learn from people who can be your mentors. So I ended up with an opportunity I never knew existed. I was given a battery of tests by a recruiter from Procter & Gamble. I'd never heard of Procter & Gamble. I'd never heard of market research. but then I became one. I just followed that bouncing ball, and what you said, Heather, about you really be open, be curious, ask questions, meet people. Have information interviews, almost anybody. There may be a career that looks interesting to you and you're kind of afraid to approach someone. I don't know anybody who is worth his or her salt who wouldn't give you 10 or 15, what might turn into 20 minutes, where you ask if I can have an information interview. You're not even looking for a job, but you go and learn. And you learn about that position and about that career. And you will then you'll just be open, ask questions, be curious. It will lead you to that first opportunity. And then be open to where it will take you from there.
Thank you. Meg, tell me, looking back at 2007 when you graduated, what do you wish someone had told you about getting a job that you can share with our seniors today?
Well, I will say first, I feel like my journalism professors were very open about the fact that I've had a career in news, and you've got to pay your dues, you're going to be working holidays. They painted a pretty accurate picture, but the one thing I didn't realize until I started looking into it was to even get your foot in the door at a newspaper, a TV station. Now I'm at a big media company. You've kind of got to toe that line that I think journalists are very good at between persistence and stalking to even get in. Yeah. Which is what I kind of learned and what I did. The very first, I got out of college, I had dreams of being a TV reporter. It's what I wanted to be. And a TV station in Jackson only had an opening for an associate producer, which is basically you're sitting back in a closet editing video and running the teleprompter. It's not that glamorous, but it's what they had open. They wanted a TV reel for the resume. I had been a print major, so all I had was my clips from where I had worked at the Daily Mississippian and done some stringer work for the Clarion Ledger. So I just sent that and then sent follow-up emails, follow-up phone calls, which some TV stations hate. They'll even put on the application, no phone calls. So you usually find some in. I'll find somebody that knows somebody at the station and I'll start calling, and that's really how I got in. And when I went in to sit in for my interview, the executive producer said, "You're very persistent." And I wasn't even giving your resume a second look, but I had emails from you. You had contacted other people at the station who came up to me, so here you are. I got the job. It wasn't that glamorous. Like I said, I was sitting in a closet editing video, but 2 years later, I was on TV as a reporter, so, you know.
I'm curious, among our panel here, how many used the internet to find a job?
Oh, yeah.
They didn't have the internet when
Well, I was going to say, you better
let's-
talk to that
Yeah, let's talk about
generation.
Has the internet been a help to job hunting, or has it compromised our ability to? Mike, do you want to?
Well, I'll just say I was talking to someone earlier about it at the beginning. You know, y'all have such an advantage, and in some ways a responsibility when you're doing an interview to know so much more about the company you're interviewing with, even the person that's interviewing you. You know, whereas I didn't have that luxury. It was either from, you know, word of mouth, some form of stalking, or, you know, persistence, talking to someone, you know, doing some, you know, kind of pre-work, either through phone calls or networking. But y'all, you know, like in our organization, what do I tell our sales reps when they go on a cold call? They have no reason not to come in there and ask who's the owner, what kind of, you know, anything, because everything is out there. I mean, there's so much transparency now, and so I had to do it just
The old-fashioned way.
old-fashioned way, but.
And Heather, how did it change?
I would recommend, if you don't have a LinkedIn profile right now, create one this afternoon. That is a must. If I was kind of starting out again, I would probably pick a couple of cities that I really found interesting of where I thought that I would want to be, and then research companies that were in that area. And then if you're looking at larger corporations, become familiar with talent acquisition. Anybody who has a title that has talent acquisition in their role, that is who you need to contact, because they are the gatekeepers. They're going to be the ones that vet the resumes before the hiring manager ever looks at it. So those are the people that are going to do your informational interviews, and if you seem qualified, then they're going to pass that on to the hiring manager. So those are kind of the people that you need to look at. Be sure to scrub and scrub again all of your social media accounts. Be careful about what you tweet, what you put on Facebook, what you put on Instagram, because especially Twitter, you can search it on Google and everything is there. So that would be my recommendation, because employers do look at that actually very carefully. So if you have a lot of cuss words on your Twitter profile and all that kind of stuff, I would be deleting lots of tweets.
I'll also add, they look at it after you get hired too.
Yes. So there's a new self-censorship that you have to worry about. So no drunken pictures on the square and all that kind of stuff. That's really fun to post when you're in college and everything else. It's not so cute when you get out of school. It's unfortunately, you are judged on things like that. So
be careful with political posts as well.
Yes. And in the nature of our climate, especially in today's world, obviously you have your own opinion, but just be careful, because a lot of brands, especially today, they don't want to get into anything political in nature, because it's very polarizing to their customers. So just be conscientious of those things. Snapchat as well. It's
good.
You can certainly.
You're out there. You are your brand. That's
you
part
can
of it.
definitely take your screenshot of your snaps and all that kind of stuff. Like, I'm sure you guys know, but just those are things that to be very, very mindful of.
Great advice.
So that's kind of
Good.
So talent acquisition, recruiters, anybody who has those type of titles within LinkedIn, see who you know. Obviously, if you do have connections within those organizations, maybe your family friend works for a company and they can introduce you to other people. If you have, not only do you need to go on the company websites and submit your resume, take it a step further, because they are getting hundreds, if not thousands, of resumes for those positions. Make sure that you talk about if you've had internships, what those responsibilities were. If you've had waitressing jobs or things like that, how does that translate into what you are applying for? And one resume is not the end-all, be-all for each job. You need to tailor your resume and your email that you send to that company and everything else to that position. How do your traits and skills translate to what that company is looking for within the job description?
Leslie, I have a question. When you were graduating and figuring out your life plan, did you have someone tell you, this is what a hiring manager is looking for in an entry-level employee, or did you guess? And now that you've been in the professional world and you have the opportunity to assess talent, what do you look for in entry-level people? Leslie, why don't you take a shot at that, and then Meg, you handle that.
Determining, I really believe in developing your personal brand, that you develop yourself, for yourself. What you force yourself to write down what you believe, as if you're a product. Your brand is, first of all, going to be your name at this point in time. And you think, what are my core competencies? What are my skill sets? What are the things that I want to present? For a brand, we say, what's the personality of the brand? For Pringles, it's lighthearted, and it's fun, and it's whimsical, and it's party time. So that's probably not your positioning, but what do you feel, how do you want to present yourself? I highly recommend, and I'll tell you that's how, because when you walk into an interview or if you present yourself through a resume or some form of communication, and I so believe in what you said about you study that, not just your personal brand, but how does it then fit into what that company is looking for. You have to look smart, that you have read what does that company do. You read everything you can and you tailor your talents and who you are to that position, so you don't send something generic. But it's very important, because if you focus on what your personal brand is and what is your brand character, you can think, and that's how you package yourself. Your package is how you dress, how you groom yourself. Because if you are applying for a job at Budweiser and you want to be in the hip social media area, maybe you go in dressed a little differently from the way you would if you're going in for a corporate position and you want to look more businesslike and more professional. So, because I look for that. When I meet somebody, I really can't help it. It's how I'm trained. I look and I say,
what skills?
What is this person? He dressed himself this way. What is he trying to communicate?
But what skills are at the top of your list that an entry-level employee has to have for consideration for a job?
Well, I'll take categorical things that I think would be more meaningful than somebody looking for a marketing position or a consumer, but confidence. I want to see confidence, not cockiness or arrogance. I want to see confidence. You feel good about yourself. You walk in with your posture and the way you've dressed, and your whole communication is that you feel comfortable in your skin. You're comfortable in who you are and that you can do this job. So confidence is very important, and to listen. Now, the interviewer is going to be generally the first to ask the question, so you want to take the lead of the interviewer, and the face-to-face is very important. Yes, a lot can be done on the internet, a lot can be done, but in the end, and that's why I feel what I can speak from is there are some tried and true lessons and tried and true aspects that work that are time tested, time immemorial. Yes, maybe the job you end up doing doesn't exist today, and that's how fast the world is changing. But in terms of how you present yourself, how you go after a job, that is time tested, time immemorial. Be confident. Let the interviewer, don't overspeak. Your confidence shouldn't override the interviewer. Let the interviewer lead with the kinds of questions, but be prepared to be extemporaneous. If they ask you, well, what's the most interesting thing you've done in your life? It may not have anything to do with the job that you're applying for and your skills. You have to be a whole person. They're really looking at the whole person. They are not just looking at your skill set. Nobody does that anymore. They're really looking at how flexible you are, how confident, how able you can answer the questions without stumbling,
Well,
and be human.
I'd like to add too that, I mean, with the reality is you guys are just coming out of school. No employer is going to think you're going to have these years of experience and all this knowledge of on-the-job knowledge and all this kind of stuff. When I'm hiring entry-level employees that are just coming out of college, I'm looking for, do they have a willingness to learn? Can they be led? Can they take direction? Did they bring me writing samples?
All right, so writing would be at the top of the list?
Well, for my role, I wouldn't say that it necessarily is the top, but if they bring me samples or like, here's a project or a capstone project that we did, that shows me that there has been effort, there's They do bring new skills to the table. They are confident in their abilities. That's what it tells me.
I want to get your perspective as CEO of a company in terms of what you look for.
Yeah, I've interviewed a lot of people in different levels, and a couple of things to add to what both Leslie and Heather said. My one pet peeve when you interview someone, and it's going to happen to you in an interview, they're going to say, "Do you have any questions for me?" I'll say, "Do you have any questions for me?" And when someone says, "No, I think I'm good," I'm like, You know, I've totally lost interest in that person because they didn't show passion, they didn't show curiosity, they didn't show. Because if you think about it, when you're interviewing, whether you're interviewing for a sales job or not, that person interviewing you is picturing you on a sales call because you're selling yourself, right, at an interview. So think about it in that sense. And I mean, whether it's you're doing a speech or you're in a meeting or in an interview, I mean, the old get in front of a mirror deal and practice it. Practice your punch. You know, what's going to be your big, deal you're going to talk about. That makes a huge impression. And to also add to what they're saying, I also like hearing stories. You know, you're not going to be able to really talk about a job experience relative to the job you're interviewing in. But I mean, you've got great stories. You've got some stuff that you might have experienced on an internship or in this school. This IMC school, I didn't know about this IMC school, and there's a lot to talk about that. So telling stories and how it related to you, and showing your scars too, showing some experiences where, you've faced some heartache and you pulled yourself up and you fought through it. Those kind of things mean a lot because it shows character and it shows passion. I don't care what you're interviewing for. That's someone, that I would want to be a part of my organization to help foster his or her career, and someone that, would be good to work with, so.
Yeah, you always want to be, a lot of times you'll get questions trying to show things that you need to work on or where areas of improvement are, maybe mistakes you've made and such. But as you go through and kind of recognize maybe some of those mistakes that you've made, how did you then fix or rectify the situation? So it's always let's end on the positive, because at the end of the day, these interviews and such, you are ultimately selling yourself, and that's really hard to do. It is something that is learned. The more you interview, the better you become. I'm not a very good self-promoter, and it is something that after you do it enough, then you kind of understand, here's how I need to present myself to do it. So you're probably going to do a lot of interviews at the beginning, and the more you do, the better you become at them. So
I have a question. Or did you
I
want to go first?
I do want to go. Meg, I think you're the only representative of hard journalism on the panel. And I'm curious for our seniors that are looking to going into the magazine business or the newspaper business, what you look for today. Because I've heard a statistic that we have a lot of IMC majors that don't go into traditional IMC jobs anymore. They go into print media or magazines. And what you look for as a hiring manager?
Especially for entry-level positions, the biggest thing is someone looking to learn. Journalism is something you learn a lot in school, but you learn even more on the job. There have been news directors I've worked for that I credit just as much as some of my journalism professors of turning me into the journalist I am today. News can get gritty. It can chew people up and spit them out. But the people who always survive are the people who come in knowing they don't know it all. They're willing to learn. I started in Jackson, it's a little smaller market, and I'm thankful for that because I was able to make mistakes on the job and learn from them. And journalism, I feel like it's the only field I know. And in journalism, you have older journalists who are eager to be mentors. They're eager to teach on the job. So just find that person whatever job you're in, look for that. But I would say the biggest thing going in is I'm looking for someone who is not a know-it-all, is willing to ask questions, and is willing to learn. And I think the rest can really be taught on the job if someone's willing to learn it.
Thank you. Leslie?
Hi, I'm curious about something today, and I think it would be meaningful to share with those who'll be looking for jobs soon. And that is when you walk into an interview, you're a graduate, and Mike, this I will ask you in particular because you interview a lot of people, whether a student, recent graduate, entry-level job, should already made an appointment for the interview, and they arrive and they introduce themselves and you introduce yourself. Do you expect somebody to call you Mike or Mr. Sweet?
Well, that's just
That's okay, whatever.
Mike.
Yeah. How do you feel if an interviewee is coming in and says, "Hello, Mr. Sweet, I'm Mary Jane"?
Yeah, I've that's a great question. I've come across that and I've said, "Hello, Mr. Smith," and they're like, "Please call me Joe," and that's what I've always done. Just please call me Mike, and that.
Do you have any feeling about one way or the other? If somebody comes in and says, "Hi, Mike, I'm..."
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I would always correct them, say, "Please call me Mike," but if they come in and say, "Mr. Sweet," or "Hi, Mike,"
yeah,
I would
like to
like,
know
"Whoa."
if you have any different perception.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way. If someone said, "Hey, Mike," even though I would...
Or "Hello, Mike."
Yeah,
Hey, Mike.
what's up, Mike? I'd probably, again, you're envisioning this person on a sales call or in front of a client or in front of a whatever person you're working with. So you want them to get the best impression of it. So to your point, yeah, I would probably err on the side of Mr. or Mrs. and then let them correct you.
No, I would love to know.
Well, I mean, my thought about it, if you guys came in and I was interviewing you and you called me Mrs. Floyd, I mean, obviously it wouldn't, I would correct you and say, "Hey, just call me Heather." I mean, I wouldn't have this big feeling of, "Oh, they're not getting the job, they called me Mrs. Floyd." But at the same time, I mean, it would not be a weight in the decision whatsoever.
But do you have an impression, just a
Well,
first?
I think it would say, "Oh, they're young." Like, I mean, if it would just kind of give this, when you graduate, I mean, my perception is, and my experience is, at this point, you're on an equal playing field. You have your colleagues. It doesn't matter if they're 60 years old or if they're 22 years old. You're all colleagues. Yes, they have a lot more experience than you do, and you respect that, and they bring things to the table that you cannot. But I don't know. Once you get into the working world, I just feel like the
levels the playing field.
Yeah, you have this kind of new. You're no longer a child. You are an adult, and
I think it elevates the position. Now, when I'm teaching, I say to my students, and it's on the syllabus, call me Ms. Westbrook. You don't have to call me Professor. I don't expect, and I'm kind of a little bit taken aback if a student says, "Hi, Leslie," because I think at a student level, that shows there is a difference and respect. But once you're in the workforce, that's why I was curious about other people, because when I met Jim Burke, who was CEO of Johnson & Johnson, and he's the one who guided the whole Tylenol crisis, and I just said, "Hi, Jim, I'm Leslie Westbrook," because I didn't want him to think I'm less than he is. Yes, I mean, he's gone now, but I had him on a pedestal, but I wanted him to know I'm a peer, and I don't think of myself as subservient or less than he. So I said, "Hi, Jim, I'm Leslie Westbrook." So I'm just curious how other people felt.
Before I open it up to the audience, I have a question for the panel. Advice on how you distinguish yourself in the interview. I've read a lot of the philosophy of hiring managers, and the one word that seems to come up all the time is the hiring manager is looking for a reason to say no. how do you get the hiring manager to say yes?
Wow.
Any tricks, tips?
So I've interviewed for a lot of jobs. I was telling them last night where I've had, since I graduated, I've had been at 5 different companies. And thankfully, it has pretty much all been by choice. The recession hit in 2008, and new staff was cutting at the publication that I was at, so I was let go. Thankfully, I was already enrolling into graduate school, so I made it from part-time grad school to full-time grad school. But then since then, I've been offered just good opportunities each step of the way. But with that, so my most recent position, we had a company acquisition. So another company bought my company, and I could tell that the culture of the company was really changing. It was becoming extremely aggressive, and that is not my personality. So I kind of said, okay, here's my chance to kind of really think about what direction I want to take my career this time. And I'd been doing a lot of nonprofit kind of healthcare marketing, and then this most recent role had been B2B marketing, so business to business marketing. It was financial payments company. So I thought, you know what, I really want to focus and do more business to consumer marketing. And so started interviewing with people, and there were some companies that had interest. Interviews went well, but myself, I wasn't fully into it because it was like, well, if it happens, it happens. And, so I would kind of follow up, give a thank you email and stuff. But when I interviewed at Fruit of the Loom, I was like, this is really, really great place. Like, the interviews went wonderful. The people were amazing. I was like, okay, I think this is the right place. And, so I made sure that everybody that I interviewed with, that I wrote a handwritten thank you note, sent it to them, followed up afterwards. So there was this extra level of persistence and genuine want of the role. And then I started thinking, kind of back as to the various roles that I've had over the years. And I was like, you know what, that's what I've done each time that I've accepted a position. I've always, if I was given the thumbs up and offered the role, it was because I actually wrote a handwritten thank you note.
But I want to get to something that you said, Mike, that you will hire someone on strength of character, it seems, all things being equal with regard to competence. And so talk about, the fact that some of our seniors could say, hey, I trekked the Himalayas in Nepal for 6 months and
right. Yeah, no, that certainly stands out. But I would put above that even more so passion and enthusiasm.
So how does that manifest itself in an interview?
A number of ways. Verbally, physically. They're into the interview. The questions they ask, as we say in our business, ask for the business. I want this job. I've studied your company. I love your culture. I love what you're about. I love where you're going. I want to work here. I want to be part of this. That doesn't happen a lot. Ask for the business, and show passion. Passion, and enthusiasm. What Emerson said, nothing great comes without enthusiasm. I would take someone who's more passionate and maybe okay than someone who's like an elite, decorated resume. Who, yeah, I'm pretty good, but I got other things going on. I'd take someone who's passionate every day. But I'd love to go back to real fast what Leslie said about the question of, Mr. and Mrs. and all that. And it brings up a good point that I think it's good to know is right now in the workforce, there are 4 generations in the workforce. So there's people who didn't grow up with 300 plus TVs, and they don't know what bin watching is. They're much more patient. They're used to Mr. and Mrs. potentially, the people that are interviewing you. They may not understand things. I mean, my 14-year-old son, I had a problem with our Sonos in our house, and he fixed it. And, you know, the only thing I can now tell him to fix is the tall grass outside. So y'all come with a great advantage of insight on what companies are, and you can speak to this, I'm sure, or everybody, about companies are reshaping their mission statements, their inner workings, how they communicate, based on this next generation of workforce. I mean, there's not an industry meeting I don't go to where they talk about that and planning for that. So anyway, you have an advantage, but also just be mindful that the person you're interviewing with or your future boss might not have the same kind of, didn't grow up the same way. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that can make a difference in something. But again, going back to passion and all that, they still believe in that too.
Yeah, and I think, just to add on to what Mike was saying, so I think that most of the time you're probably going to interview with multiple people within the company. So you're going to kind of, a lot of times your first interview is going to be with the talent acquisition representative, and they're going to kind of get a feel for your skill set. Would it be a good fit? They're going to pass on that information to the hiring manager if they want to proceed to the next step. And so you're going to have that interview with the hiring manager. Most of the time you're going to also have interviews with some of the hiring manager's colleagues, maybe somebody else who's a direct report into them, or something to that nature. And so, but with that hiring manager, I would recommend to keep your questions more towards the role, expectations, skill set, what are they looking for, those types of questions that are kind of more job specific centric. Then when you interview with those other people that are their colleagues, that's when you get to kind of ask those questions about company culture, growth opportunities, things like that. That would be my recommendation of how do you configure and figure out your questions based on the people that you're interviewing with.
Thank you. We've got a few minutes. Let's, any questions from the audience of our panel? Brittany.
Hi, I'm Brittany Wallace. I wanted to ask, you mentioned sending handwritten letters. What do you guys think about sending in hard copies of your resume to who you're applying for?
I definitely think it can't hurt. I'm now with Time Inc., which is a big company, and you apply online. So it goes to some HR department in New York City, and they're going through it. So the people who are actually hiring for the positions don't see the full pool. They see whatever HR has pulled for them. So to get into Time, I applied that way, and I also tried to come up with any connection I could into the company, and sent that person my resume, called to see if I could take her for coffee, to talk to her, and then she passed it on for me. Because a lot of times, especially when you see these postings online, there is no mailing address. So the best thing you can do is get on LinkedIn or Facebook, search the company, see who's in it. And a lot of times, I would say most people don't mind getting a cold call or email from somebody that said, hey, I saw you have this position, I'm really interested, do you have any advice for me? Can I send my resume over to get your feedback? And that's a tactic I've used for a lot of my jobs to get in, just to get them to know I'm interested, because they may never know. So.
Any other questions? Yeah.
You said
Jessica.
there are four, and this is for anybody, there are four generations currently in the working world. Well, the millennials are one of the biggest groups that are really entering the working world right now, and we're about to be really a big driving force in a world where the majority of us coming into that world are going to be college educated on equal grounds. What would make a resume or a person stand out to get that interview in the first place?
I would make sure, so Meg and I are probably the oldest millennials in the workforce right now. We kind of are at that brink of between a millennial and a Gen X. And so I can remember when I was first interviewing and such, so I had taken, with one of my other majors being studio art, I had an emphasis in graphic design. And so one of their classes was going through and actually creating your resume. You created your own logo. You created your business card. You created all this stuff. And honestly, I actually used that same. I modified the logo since I got married. But I actually still use that color palette. So I just kind of created this whole kind of ensemble of collateral for myself when I was interviewing. So my resume,
your personal brand.
my resume looked a lot different than your typical black and white resume. I mean, it was my colors were just, it was red, white, and black. So I mean, the only difference was I had a little bit of red in there. But I had it set up differently than your typical just Word doc resume, and I would not send a Word doc to your potential employer. Make sure it's a PDF.
Because?
Well, anytime you send a Word doc, it's editable. So I would just make sure that it's a PDF. But I mean, I think that if they see something different, then that grabs their attention a little bit more. Oh, okay, let me look at this. This is because they have to search it a little closer than they do maybe some of the other resumes that look exactly the same.
Anybody else have a comment on distinguishing?
No, it's like an ad. When I've done thousands of interviews to find out when I'm working with an ad agency creating ads for a new product and I'm working for the manufacturer, you have to first grab people's attention. There is so much clutter out there. And so you have to think of your resume like that you have to, how do you catch somebody's eye that they're even gonna look a second time? But I do wanna add one piece of information to impart to you that it came to me quite naturally decades ago. I just see how it has worked. And that is whether I'm making a presentation to get a new client, or if you're interviewing for a job, or I'm at an event or a cocktail party and there's someone I want to meet and I don't want to just be, oh, hi, I just think the world of your work, I mean, just to be that generic person. But I really read up, and now you're fortunate you have the internet. You can read so much about a person, about a company. And I find something that interests me, and I said, I read that you went back to talk to your class at Harvard, and they really loved that point that you made. I mean, it's something, it's so startling because most people don't take the time, but you can do so much research on the company or the person who's going to be interviewing you, and it can even be at the end of the interview where you thank you for your time. And by the way, I read, it can either be about the person or it can be about the company. I read that there's this new product coming out and that you had something to do with that. It's just something to help differentiate you from everybody else who's interviewing. It works. It works.
Yes.
Mike, Mr. Sweet. I am so guilty of your pet peeve. I panicked during an interview, and when they asked if I had any questions, I said, no, I think I'm good. Scooted right on out of there, and it haunts me every day.
Yeah.
What would the panel be so kind as to give some advice on what kind of questions we as interviewees can be asking the interviewer
Yeah.
to show that we are passionate, but kind of, again, treading that line between stalking and perseverance to show that we are really interested in their job.
Yeah, that's a great question. Great question. But, well, a couple not to ask, at least the first two is, what's my vacation? What are our benefits?
That's HR about
That's probably not a good thing. And like what I mentioned before, when you go see you're going to go interview with this company, I mean, you have the ability to search and find out, all kinds of things about it. But to Leslie's point, throw something in there that shows that you've done some research on it. Oh, I noticed you have this project in India. Tell me more about blah, 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 blah. Because then it shows, okay, one, I've done the research, and wow, you knew about that. and now you're curious about it. And again, it kind of shows some passion, some
An
enthusiasm,
initiative.
and initiative. Because again,
Also, people like to talk about themselves.
Yeah.
So if you could ask
Yeah,
a
oh, yeah.
question that
It's
they then can talk about something about themselves, there's not a human being alive that doesn't like to be asked something about themselves, no
and
matter how
again-
shy.
again, they're imagining you in front of a client, whoever, and that's like, wow, that's a good impression. So.
I'll tell you one question I have actually asked in an interview. What do I do to get this job? How can I get this job? I've asked that. And I got the job. You know, it was a reporter job. You've got to be aggressive. And I just
Wow.
asked straight up,
What a
can I
great,
do to get it?
that's a great question.
Another question that I encourage people to come to see me, IMC is all about teamwork, right? The world of IMC. On the journalism side, there are lone rangers, but in IMC, to be successful, you got to know how to work in teams. And so a question that shows that you've thought about the business would be, hey, I've read a lot about your company. I'm using Burson-Marsteller, the firm that I work with now, that has a distinct culture. And the question that would be asked of me would be, is there a culture of collaboration at this company? Because I work well in teams, and I want to make sure that I'm joining an organization
great point.
that celebrates the team, right? I guarantee you nobody else in that hiring group is going to ask that question unless they were in this room.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, because to me that shows someone who, you know, has the spirit of teamwork and can work well, but also is someone that may be committed to this job if it met your standards, you know.
So, another question, one more. Yes.
I know we touched base on a lot of resumes, but like why not seeing what to do, but a lot of classes and just like people have said, it's the cover letter that really hones in and sets you apart. So what do you recommend or suggest, or do you think that they look at the cover letters, or what would you?
I mean, so my experience with cover letters. So, you know, when you go through and you go through the online piece, the email that you send to your talent acquisition person, or maybe you get word of who the hiring manager is and you send them a message on LinkedIn, or you know someone, a family friend or something that works within that department. That email is honestly more important than the cover letter, because if you were so let me rephrase it like this. So my experience with large corporations is that your talent acquisition person is going to be looking at the cover letter. I have actually never received the cover letter when I'm hiring anyone. I've only received the resume. Now, if I was good, I mean, I'm sure if I went and asked for it, they would give me whatever was input into the online submission form. But that is not typically what is sent, saying, here's your pool of applicants. You're typically just looking at resumes.
I'd like to address the cover letter issue, because coming from the old school world of what I call analog job search, the old-fashioned way, where people actually hire people and you try and develop relationships with the folks that you're going to be reaching out to. That the cover letter is your opportunity to distinguish yourself and to get that hiring manager to start thinking about, gee, I want to talk to this person. Cover letter does not have to be long, but it has to have some type of insight that, again, tells that hiring manager that A, you've thought about what you're good at and what this company's good at and what you can bring to the table. As students, I talk about this in my class all the time, you're programmed to deliver back what I'm saying to you, all right? As a professional, that's not going to cut it. You got to take what somebody gives you and then add value. Your cover letter is your first shot at adding value to the organization you're thinking of joining.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, so with me saying that a lot of times they'll ask for your cover letter, like I say, within the online submission. But when you actually actively engage with the person via email or whatever form of media that is your shot. If you have a lot of misspellings and grammar errors, I'm probably not even going to email you back. So that is very, very important because that is your first impression.
For example, I remember when I first started getting messages, years ago, people who are writing on their iPhone, and it's all full of, it's not grammar. And it's not, I remember my first impression was, and I had to learn, I guess that's what people do. They just breeze through it and they don't expect people to look at the typos and the misspellings, but I do.
Yeah.
I think take your time when you're looking for a job.
Yeah. Don't use emoticons in those, emails, or even if you're typing on your computer and stuff, don't just smiley face. It would be your first interaction,
We're going to cut this off now. At lunch, you're going to have an opportunity to sit with the panel up here and ask some more direct questions. What I'd like to do now is thank you guys so much and
Thank you.
invite
Thank you.
the next group up.